Welcome into Teal, the show. I'm Jamal Saints here alongside Frank Frangie. Frank, the Jaguars are in the middle of a much-needed rest streak here, the bye week. I don't think they could have gone into the bye week any better.
No, and they've earned their way to it. As a matter of fact, after that slow start, people started wondering, uh-oh, is there a problem? Are they not as good as people think? They're 1-2. They lost to the Texans. The sky's falling. What do we do? And boy, did they rally. 5 wins in a row in 5 different stadiums. Everybody knows the number by now. They earned that off week. It's a good team with a good culture, and I can't wait to see what happens in the second half of the season.
All right, so I've got a little bit of a surprise here for Frank. So one of the things that you've talked about over the course of the show is how the NFL season has almost mini seasons inside of it, almost these 3-game clusters.
That's right.
So, of course, let's switch it. We've got a script here. Okay. Because, of course, everybody wants to talk about the NFL script for the season. Right. So we've got the Jaguars script so far, maybe some scenes that have already happened. I'll see if Frank agrees with these because I've given them all titles. So the first script is, or the first scene of the script, how about a slow start, 1-2 start to the year?
And no question, that's exactly what it was. And it's one that had everybody a little bit of concern. But it was a slow start. They won the first game, had to come from behind or had to get going a little bit to do that. The Chiefs are a good football team, but they felt like they could have won that game, and then they played their worst game of the year against the Texans. So clearly a slow start. Very good part of your script. You're a good screenwriter. Good start of your script right out of the gate.
Definitely kept everybody on the edge of their seats, not the start to the script that anybody wanted to see, but the Jaguars have rebounded since then. So the next part of our script, the second scene here, they go across the pond for a little bit, but there was also the injury scare right there at the end. So you had to add a little bit of drama, right?
Yeah, you always have to have drama in that second act. That second act has some drama. They went across the pond. It's the thing everybody thought about. Look, they also found themselves a little bit, too. Part of that second act is the team that found themselves. They got together. There was some solidarity was part of that. I think it really helped them. So a very good second act. I'm with you.
A lot of bonding there, and that, of course, set up our third scene, which is the streak. The Jaguars have now won 5 straight going into the bye week. That brings us to the present moment. Team has to feel pretty good about being 6-2 right now.
Act 3 is really good. But get your popcorn ready for Act 3 because that was the best part. They played really well down the stretch, and they found some confidence, too. When a team gets that swagger a little bit, Jamal, when they all of a sudden start feeling like they're good and you can kind of tell they're good and they kind of know they're good, it makes it tougher on the other team. They play with a little more confidence. The other guy gets a little tighter. And we saw that happen in scene 3 because we really did. All of a sudden, this is a team with some confidence. This is a team with a little bit of a buzz outside of our city, and it clearly happened.
All right, the Jaguars are 6-2. They're sitting really comfortably. They've gotten off to a fantastic start. These first 3 scenes of the script so far, Jaguars fans pretty happy about them. We got to start thinking about what's next. What's the rest of the season have in store, right? Which is a lot, but everybody should have their popcorn ready. I think we mentioned it going into the year, Frank, that this one could be special and that everyone needs to make sure that they kind of savored this moment because you haven't had a whole lot of seasons like this in Jaguars history. Sitting at 6-2 and we start talking about the best start since 1999, I think you start to see that this could be some history that the Jaguars haven't had in a while.
I don't think there's any question. It's the best team they've had in a long time. But know this, the next act, the next scene is not going to be easy. After the break, they play the 49ers, who are very good. They've got 2 games coming up against the Titans, and despite playing so well against them last year, the Titans have always been a bugaboo for this football team. They've got Baltimore. They've got Cincinnati. They've got some good football teams coming up. So it's a good thing that they're ready. They caught their breath. They are 6-2. They had some time off. But the next stretch is a hard stretch, Jamal. There's no doubt about that. Now, the good thing is you got a good team and a good team to handle that hard stretch, but it's a difficult stretch coming up for the Jaguars. And I think they all know that.
They figured out gritty, not pretty. Let's see if in the second half of the season they can figure out just pretty, right? All right, coming up when Teal the Show returns, we'll start to look ahead to that second half of the season. We'll get Frank's opinions on some of the games that are right around the corner for the Jaguars. That's straight ahead when we return. Welcome back here into Teal, the show. Jaguars in the middle of the bye week. In the first half of the show, we kind of looked at that first half of the season, the first bit of the script. Still a lot of script left to be written for this year. Let's start to talk about those second half games, Frank. Of course, the first one is a tough one against the San Francisco 49ers. Now, 49ers are one of the top teams in the NFC, the other half of the league. They also just made a big trade for Chase Young. So that's going to even make them a little bit maybe better than what we expected coming in.
They're an interesting team to figure out for a number of reasons. Number one, they started out great, but they've been leaking some oil of late. They're not playing as well. Even Brock Purdy has come back to earth a little bit. So they're not playing as well as they had been. That's part of it. The other part, so they're going to be irritated. They're ready to kind of turn it back to the positive. Also, they got Chase Young to play on the opposite side of Bosa. Listen, that's pretty good rush ends. That's what you want now, guys on either side. That's what the Jags are trying to get done when they drafted both Josh Allen and Trayvon Walker so high. That's what the Steelers have and T.J. Watt and Alex Highsmith. You want guys on either side, and it looks like now the 49ers have that. So they're a good football team. The bigger question for me, even more than Chase Young, can they refine that early magic? Because they were really good early on, and they've struggled a little bit since then.
All right, before we go any farther into the Jaguars' schedule, this will be the first time we get a chance to look at a new player in a Jaguars uniform. Ezra Cleveland. Jaguars did make a deal at the deadline. It wasn't the pass rusher that we may have talked about last week when we were talking early in the week about who the Jaguars might make a deal for, but he's a very good player that could help that Jaguars offensive line.
I love this deal. Don't like it, I love it, and here's why. Number one, he's a good player. The one concern I had about the offensive line is there was a lot of youth on it until Tyler Shatley went in there. You've got a rookie right tackle. You've got a second-year center. With Walker Little playing left guard, you had a very young guard. Man, that's a young group now. I know the left tackle and the right guard are. This guy, he's a young guy, but he's played a lot of football, 42 starts in the NFL. He gives you stability, a veteran feel to him. I really like this. Not that the offensive line wasn't growing up, because it was. It's a tough-nosed group, but it grew up a little bit when Ezra Cleveland, who we assume will immediately be the left guard. They haven't announced that yet, but I'm assuming that's the play. Yeah, I love the move. Anytime you can bring in a veteran presence, and even better, a young veteran, which is what this has a second-round draft pick now. So it's a guy that people think a lot of, started most of the time in Minnesota before he got dinged up a little bit. Love the acquisition of Ezra Cleveland.
And keep in mind, Jaguars offensive line coach Phil Rosher was up in Minnesota when they drafted Cleveland before he came here to Jacksonville. So maybe getting one of his guys back. We've talked about it as the Jaguars offense kind of tries to find itself. One of the things that needed to happen was better offensive line play. And one position, sometimes if it is that position of weakness, can change the entire offensive line. So now bringing in a guy like Cleveland helps to solidify that spot and could help to solidify that entire line.
It's almost perfect. If you think about it, you want a veteran, but you don't want an old guy. You know, you want a veteran that's young still and has all of his stuff ahead of him. I'm telling you, it's a really good move. When you go get a move like that, I said this about Brandon McManus before the season. When you go get a veteran guy to add to what was already pretty good, that means you're ready to get to the next level, and I think they are.
All right, let's move ahead on that Jaguars schedule. After the 49ers games, they have a couple of AFC South matchups. They take on the Titans, and then they take on the Texans. Now, as you mentioned earlier, that Titans game is always a tough one. It's just a team that's tough, but so is playing in Houston for this franchise.
I think one of the most intriguing teams in the league now suddenly are the Tennessee Titans. I think they found something with Will Levis. I did not think he'd be great. He looked pretty good, man. The two games we've watched the Falcons win and the loss to the Steelers yesterday, he looks pretty good, Jamal. He's big, he's physical. Boy, he throws the ball with some ease, doesn't he? The ball jumps out of his hand. I don't remember him looking that good at Kentucky. I watched a lot of SEC football. He really looks good. So I think they found something. I don't think they go back to Tannehill. I think even when he gets healthy, I think Levis is going to be their quarterback. I think they found a little something there. So they're intriguing now. They're not dead like people thought they might be. And obviously the Texans came in here and rolled the Jags, intend to play well against the Jags. So I'm telling you, the second half of the season has some real intriguing matchups.
All right, and this is where we get to that primetime turn of the season for the Jaguars. After that, Cincinnati, primetime matchup. Joe Burrow taking on Trevor Lawrence. This is going to be a good game.
Yeah.
This is one that could be a preview of something maybe you see later on in the playoffs, because the Bengals started slow to the season, but they found themselves.
No question. I think right now, if you go 6-3 in the rest of this, in the 9 remaining games, you'd feel pretty good about yourself because you'd have a 12-win season. I think 6-3 is, I'm not saying that their goal is to win them all. I get that. But as I watch this team, if you could tell me right now 6-3, I would feel pretty doggone good about it. Get to 12 wins. That means you win the division. That means you've probably got a bye. I'd like to see it because Cincinnati's starting to find itself.
Right.
Baltimore's one of the best teams in the league. We just talked about the divisional teams. And, oh, by the way, the whole thing starts with San Francisco. Look, when you're a first-place team, which is what they were last year, you get that first-place schedule, and they're going to feel the brunt of it in the second half of the season.
All right, 6-3. We'll circle back to that here in just a second. Okay, so after the Bengals game, they have a trip to Cleveland.
Right.
Then they have another primetime game against the Baltimore Ravens, who's another team that is right there in that conversation for being one of the top seeds in the AFC right now.
I'm telling you, Jamal, other than at Tampa, and I think Tampa is a struggling franchise, and by then we'll really be kind of leaking some oil, and Carolina, the other games are hard, man. They're all hard. It's in the NFL. There's no easy games.
No.
But, I mean, other than those two, even on paper, the other ones look tough. There's some good football teams coming up. Cincinnati, Baltimore. I'm glad they're both at home, by the way, and San Francisco. The three best teams they play are those three, and they're all right here. It's going to be a tough
right.
part of the schedule.
And then the last three are Tampa Bay, Carolina, and then, of course, another Titans game. Okay, Frank, you said 6-3 the rest of the way. Are there three games that you already kind of have in your mind that are the tougher matchups of the rest of the way?
Yeah, I would say, obviously, the first one, San Francisco. Sure. I don't think there's any question about that. And then I would say the other two, Cincinnati and Baltimore. They're night games. Everybody's going to be watching. So I just said 3 home games. Think about that.
Yeah.
Cleveland's sneaky, but I think they're better than Cleveland. I learned my lesson with New Orleans. They're better than New Orleans. I thought they would lose because that game, just where it fell, the short week on the road, loud crowd. But they won the game because they were better. I'm not sure they're better than Baltimore, Cincinnati, or San Francisco. They might be, but I don't know that I can sit here and tell you I think that they are. I think they are better than Cleveland. I think they are better than the other teams in the South, and I think they are better than Tampa and Carolina. The 3 teams they play that I'm not sure they've got the better roster, they might, is Cincinnati, Baltimore, and San Francisco, because I've told you this before. I think there's 7 or 8 teams each year that could win the Super Bowl, and I think all 3 of those teams are on that list.
Do you think they've reached the point in the process where they win the games they should win?
I do. And now look, the NFL is such that eventually you're going to lose one you're supposed to win.
Sure.
People get upset, but I do. I think they have a good team. I've said it all along. There's 7 or 8 good teams in the league, and I think they're one of the good teams, and the good teams tend to take care of business.
All right. Do you think that 6-3 rest of the way will be good enough to have them maybe with a home playoff game outside of just one?
I do. I think 12 wins. I don't know that 12 wins gets them home field throughout, but I think 12 wins gets them the division and gets them a home playoff game. I'd be very surprised if it does not. Look, they're headed for some good things. It may be better than 6-3. They've won 5 in a row.
Yeah.
Credit for this team. They're a good football team that's won a lot of games in a row. I would think 6-3 with what I think is a really hard second half of the schedule would be pretty darn good.
Now, I know we've talked about savoring this season and how this is the best start since 1999, but you got to think this is just the crack of the window. This is opening that window for this team. A lot of young players that are still getting better, even if they do have some things they have to take care of in the offseason. This is the start of something.
Well, that's the thing, and that's probably a conversation for another day, you know, but I will tell you when that day comes, that's what's exciting. You got the coach and the quarterback, and teams that get the coach and the quarterback go to Super Bowls, and then you've got a defense. The story of the season, Jamal, I've said this all along, the surprise has been how good that defense is. So good against the run, so good at getting takeaways. I didn't see that coming. I thought the offense would be good, and it hasn't hit stride yet. I think the story of the season is how good that defense will be. And so many of those guys will be back, and the ones that won't, there's guys ready to step in. I love where I think the Jaguars are headed.
Mike Caldwell, first half MVP?
Fantastic first half MVP. Put me down. Where do I check the box?
Love it. Love it. All right, we've got plenty more season, and we will keep you covered with everything right here on Teal the Show. Thanks for tuning in tonight, Frank. Thanks for being here. Good night, everybody, and go Jags.